Come to Candlelight Inn, home of the original Chicken George and Jan Sauce. Dine in, carry out, and catering available. Located in Rock Falls and Sterling, Illinois, as well as Clinton, Iowa. Come try our original Chicken George today.
Need a roof, vinyl windows, or doors? Call R.E. Duchesne Construction. With an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau and servicing Will, Grundy, and Kendall counties, call R.E. Duchesne. 815-722-2821. Financing available. Find out more online at reduchene.com.
Are going to come right down to the wire. Yeah, he really likes this field. Team of the Week MVP.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
We're here to help you with your problems that result from an automobile accident or an injury on the job or the loss of a loved one. There's no reason you should go through this alone and guess that you're doing things right.
We deal with tragedies that affect families and individuals every day.
Come here and protect your interests. We've been doing this collectively for over 100 years. Let's put that experience to work for you.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Welcome into the Friday Night Drive podcast. I am Kyle Nabors, along with Steve Soucie. We are live with you here at 11 a.m. on Monday, November 6th, to break down the second round of the high school football playoffs. All 64 games, obviously, now in the book. We're down to 32 games left in the high school football season. It's starting to that realization is starting to sink in a little bit for me, Seuss.
Yeah, when I was kind of doing what I do on Saturday nights after the playoffs are over, for that weekend, starting to sift through the games and realize that there weren't quite as many games to sift through as I've been going through for the last couple of weeks. Always an intriguing part of the time of the year, but then I start to get a little, I guess, a little tense because I realize that we're almost running out of time here. I try not to look too far ahead, but we're down now to the last 3 weeks of the high school football season, and that always makes me sad when I realize that that's around the corner.
I know that, like, the bittersweet feeling starts to creep in about this time of year. As we really, you're so used to it just being insane for 9 weeks of the regular season and into the postseason. It kind of quickly starts to tail off. Thank you, everyone who is joining us live this morning on the Friday Night Drive podcast. I see Alex Acevedo, a big fan down in Kankakee County, already in the chat this morning. Mr. Shorty, a regular on the Bears podcast, checking in with the greetings here. Appreciate that as well, Mr. Shorty. Seuss, we got a lot to dive into from this second round. Before we do, make sure you go to FridayNightDrive.com. We'll have all your content up there right now, including what we learned from the second round. Drop that from the Seuss this weekend or this morning. A lot to get ready through this the quarterfinal round of the playoffs. You can follow us on Twitter or at FNDrive. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and we're TikTok. That's what else. Too many social media platforms to keep track of nowadays. You can find Seuss on Twitter at the Seuss. You can find myself on Twitter at Kyle Nabors Seuss. As I was mentioning before we go game by game, let's hit a couple different things that you mentioned in your what we learned, what you learned in the second round of the playoffs. First off, let's go with, I know of at least 3 games that were decided on teams electing not to go for the tie but going for the win. You had Roxana go for it. You had Bradley Bourbonnais go for it. And who was the third game? I'm blanking offhand here. There was another one.
It was Richards Glenwood, but let me correct you. It wasn't Roxana that went for it. It was St. Joe Ogden, and they didn't get it. And Roxana won. So, yeah, there were 3 games that came down to 2-point conversion decisions in overtime. And strangely enough, it was one of those situations where a couple of weeks ago we had a bunch of these scenarios where they got the 2-point conversions. This time the teams trying for the 2-point conversion were 0 for 3 in that situation. The defense is held. So when you went back to that scenario of a couple of weeks ago, you're thinking to yourself, well, why wouldn't you go for it? Always seems to work out. But in this case, did not, with much higher stakes. So gutsy calls in all situations, and I think all of those teams would probably do it again if given the opportunity. But, yeah, definitely some wild finishes. And then on top of it, there was another game that was decided by a touchdown that was scored with less than 2 seconds to play in the game. So, so a lot of really intriguing finishes that came down to the wire.
Yeah, I can't hold it against any coach that elects to go for 2 in high school football. When you're talking, it's not like extra points are just given at this level. So, I don't really have any issue for any coach that goes for 2. I was talking to my nephew who played for Moments where I grew up, right? And at that time, they lost a playoff game. We're going back like a decade now ago, right? They lost a playoff game to Sterling Newman where they went for 2 on the last play of the game to try and beat them. I think it was a state quarterfinal. And Matt Fox was the head coach at the time. Interestingly enough, now the head coach, or not the head coach, the offensive coordinator over at Bradley Bourbonnais, another one of those teams involved, as we were just mentioning, going for it on the final play. My nephew was wondering if Matt was the guy that made that call for his head coach, Mike Cole.
Yeah, it could be interesting to decide that. I've seen, that's the only one of the 3 plays that I've seen on video. I've seen it from 2 different angles. And to be honest with you, I think if Bradley had to do it again, they might run the same play again. And 9 times out of 10, I believe they'd probably convert it based on the scenario. The receiver was open. It was just one of those situations where I think he slipped or the timing was off just a little bit. And the throw, and the receiver was open on the play. It wasn't, and it wasn't a forced throw. It got away from him. Didn't happen. Sometimes that's the play that, it happens. Sometimes it just doesn't click, even though it's there. But the play was there. The receiver was open, but there was something in the mixture that was a little bit off, and it didn't get completed. But I think if they did that time and time again, I think they run the same play, it might have came out with a better factor. So definitely hard to second guess the decision, especially when the play was there and it looked like they had the opportunity to potentially win the game on the road against the top seed in 7A. You're only going to get so many chances in that type of situation. They took their shot. It didn't work for them.
Yeah, Alex says the Bradley Bourbonnais Boilermakers were close. Watching the clip back, receiver slipped at the top of the route on that grass field, messed up the timing. Yeah, that's the other side. I talked about extra points at the high school level being far from a given. The other thing is, all it takes is a player slipping at the top of a route on a bit of a wet field, and that's how a season ends. But that is football, right? And seeing down here, Alex followed that up with Cole made that decision in 2015 in the playoff, 2-point for the win. That was their quarterfinal. Then he followed it up with a semi-run. Yeah, that was the game against Libertyville that was played in the snow, I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think back to that game, Alex or Suze, maybe you remember. Did they go for 2 in that Libertyville game, or Alex, are you talking about maybe like a matchup before they got to that game against Libertyville? I can't remember.
The Libertyville game, to my understanding, that was the Riley Lee's game where it was highly controversial. Controversial whether or not he actually got into the end zone on that play.
He did not get into the end zone on that play. I remember
but there were people that were getting the torches out on that one because it was close. I mean, I saw at the time multiple video angles from it. And this is once again why I stress over and over again, it's not easy to be an official, guys. It's just not.
There was a ton of snow on the field.
There are plays like that happen in every single game where everyone swears that they saw it better, but Put the shirts on if you really believe that you're capable of making those calls right 100% of the time. I urge you. Go ahead. Add your services to the fold.
I will say that I got the call right. They got it wrong that day. Riley Lees did not make the end zone. I was right there on the end zone next to. It was funny. I can now that you mentioned it, I can think of it. The official on my sideline, and the play was on the opposite hash, but the official on my sideline, if I remember correctly, they were divided. One put up touchdown, the other did not. I think the guy on my side signaled that he was short, which he was short. Doesn't really matter. It's been 10 years, but it's just football, game of inches, man. And Alex says it was the first game in that playoff run where they went for 2. Let's see what else we got in here before we dive in game by game. Appreciating the question in the comments. You can join us live if you are on YouTube or the Friday Night Drive Facebook page and leave us a question or a comment. If you're watching this, do us a favor, leave a thumbs up. Help us get to 25 likes on this channel or on this video. Subscribe to the channel. It helps other people find the show. Kevin Patterson asks, Zeus, how good is Lincoln Way West? This is a team you're pretty familiar with.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see what they've done in the postseason. Kind of coming into the playoff bracketing, I didn't really know what to expect of them. Opened up in the first round against a Hoffman Estates team that everything that I had picked up against was going to be a fast, athletic team that would be able to do some things. And Lincoln Way West just rolled them. And then this week, there was kind of like a little bit apprehensive for Lincoln Way West having to make that long road trip down to Collinsville. Collinsville's shown a propensity to be a little bit tricky in the 7A draw in the past. And Joey Campagna, a monster game, 5 rushing touchdowns for them this week. They were never really tested. It was early in the game. It was somewhat close. And then Lincoln Way West rattled off 4 consecutive touchdowns and just ran away and hid. So obviously this is a football team that is playing its best football at the right time. It makes for a very interesting quarterfinal matchup with another team that I think is doing exactly the same thing in Downers Grove North. They're playing tremendous football at the right time. So an intriguing matchup of a 12 and a 13 seed in the next round. But right now, Lincoln Way West is at their apex, I think, playing way better than they were 4 or 5 weeks ago.
I agree with you 100%. And Kevin, Sue's kind of alluded to there, you got a matchup against Downers Grove North here. None of the matchups at this point when you get to the quarterfinals are going to be easy. But the way that 7A bracket has shaped up, Susan and I have talked about it a lot through, once this bracket was revealed. On that top side, there's opportunities for really any of these teams to make it down to state. I think Lincoln Way West has as good a chance as Glenbard East, Downers Grove North, or Normal Community to make it down to state, Zeus.
Yeah, I think the top half of that bracket, if you go and you look through it, class by class, if I were to say which 4-team pod is the most wide open, I would identify it as the top half of 7A.
Let's see. Mr. Shorty says, Joliet Catholic beat my buddy's grandson's Peoria team. How is Joliet Catholic done since, Zeus?
Well, absolutely overwhelmed. Triad in the second round. They came up to Joliet Catholic. Defensively, Joliet Catholic was all over everything, ran back 2 touchdowns on returns. And Joliet Catholic's offense, which I was at the Peoria game, was running the ball very effectively, did so again with Triad. They were ahead in that game. It felt like almost instantaneously they were ahead 35-0. So they put on their playoff gear and they're going. That's the thing right now. So they have now offensively. I had some questions about them entering the playoffs. They seem to have resolved those issues.
Yeah, Mr. Shorty, if you're looking for a good football game to watch on Saturday this weekend, man, check out Joliet Catholic against Morris in the 5A quarterfinals. That's going to be a doozy of a matchup. We'll be back later in the week to preview that game. Since we got a couple more questions coming in here, or questions and comment, whether on the go or regular with the Friday Night Drive podcast, says Dixon has had a good chance to win that game against St. Lawrence. They stalled inside their 20-yard line 3 times. If they would have capitalized, Dixon would have won 35-31, but that's football, right? Yeah, Dixon in that game, one thing I wanted to point out, St. Lawrence with the win, as you mentioned in what we learned after the second round, Suze, 17% of the remaining teams in the playoffs, including St. Louis, coming from the Chicago Catholic League East Suburban Catholic Conference. Listen, we could go about this every single year and have this conversation, right? But again, this conference is just a really tough out. You got to play pretty much perfect football to knock these teams out of the postseason.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We were looking at it, as we headed into the weekend, and the first Catholic League team to play this weekend lost. So all of a sudden we're like, well, maybe a few of them will fall this week. And then we got into Saturday and every single one of them won their games. So, they are, as a collective, they've been battle tested through their regular season. It's going to take a very clean and, let's be honest, really, really strong effort to get these teams out of this playoff field, even at this level. When we get to the quarterfinals, we're starting to see them pair off against one another. So obviously there's going to be less of them in the field next week. But this week, a lot of those teams took their shots. Not a lot of them were actually in those games. So like Weather mentions, if you're going to take a shot at a team like St. Lawrence in this situation, you've got to cash those opportunities in when you have them. You don't have to play perfect football. They're not, it's not like we're going against, an NFL team going against a high school team here, but you do have to execute the opportunities that you're given, and not capitalizing on 3 opportunities inside the 20-yard line are going to get you against almost any team, and especially the good Catholic League teams that are still remaining in this field.
I see W Flag 2016 in here with a question. Jim Sowers in here with the question. Jesse, we need a cook with a comment as well. Before we get to those, we're going to go ahead because I see those are usually those are about the middle classes here. We're going to go ahead and dive in, starting with 1A and kind of work our way up. I'm going to throw the results on screen here, Suze, and I go back up here to 1A. We'll quickly kind of work our way through each of these classes here. We're trying to keep this to about 40 minutes today, guys. So we're about halfway through. Starting in 1A, Suze, what stood out to you in this bracket?
This was a fairly, consistent class at this point in time. I felt like the teams that I expected to win these games did win them. Yeah. And there were a lot of matchups here. I was looking at the Hope Academy Aurora Christian game. I'm not stunned that game flipped from its regular season result. But that was the game that I was most interested to see the outcome. And as I kind of expected, it turned out to be one of the closest games in the class, because obviously that Greenfield Casey Westfield game came right down to the final seconds. But highly competitive game between those two. And like I mentioned before, Hope Academy into the quarters for the first time in school history.
Did you pick Rova to beat Stark County?
I did not. I guess that would be classified as the one game where the result was different than I thought. Stark County beat them in the regular season when they played. But Stark County was also kind of walking a tight wire during the regular season. They finished undefeated, but they had a lot of close calls. I was a little surprised by the margin, but not necessarily stunned that Rova won the game.
Jesse says, we need a cook, says 1A and 4A state finals seem like a lock already. Let's just hit on 1A there quickly. I think going in this before the postseason, you and I both felt we were looking at a Lena Winslow Belleville Althoff championship matchup as the most likely scenario in 1A. Has anything happened through the first 2 rounds that has dissuaded you from that feeling?
Not really. If I had to pick it, that would be the same way that I would pick it today. I think I'm very, very intrigued, however, with the quarterfinal game between Camp Point Central and Belleville Althoff this week. Both of those teams are extremely fast and athletic for 1A level programs. I think you're going to be, if you watch that game or go to that game, I think you'll see a lot of blurs that will pass for football players, because team speed is what both of those organizations bank their philosophies on. So a really quick and athletic game there. So, but no, those are the 2 teams that I think will advance.
And I completely agree with you. Looking at where we're at, if there's going to be something that upsets the apple cart before we get to the Bloomington Normal, to the state championship, I think it's going to be Camp Point Central being able to take down Belleville Althoff. But we'll see how that game plays out this week. And let's go to Class 2A, Suze. First thing that stood out to me was my guys down there in the South bracket, Nashville taking down Quincy Notre Dame 27-18. You can't stop the Hornets. You can't even try to stop the Hornets. It's just what they do, Seuss.
Well, they controlled this game. I mean, it was a relatively low-scoring game, but right from the get-go, they took the lead and just kind of kept Quincy Notre Dame at arm's length. Doing what they do in the playoffs. I was looking at this the other day, and I guess this escaped me last year, but they lost in the first round of the playoffs, which snapped the string of 2 consecutive runs to the 2A state championship game. So I don't know what happened last year. They must have lost their mojo for a little bit, but appears like it's their playoff hats are back on again.
I'm not surprised to see Seneca a win over Rock Ridge. I was a bit surprised to see the margin, 47-14 there. Seneca and Wilmington both rolling to set up a rematch of those two teams that played back in week 1. Do you think this game plays out in a similar fashion? How much have these teams learned about themselves and evolved from that first matchup way back in late August?
Well, the first game was a battle of, exactly what you would expect it to be. Hard running football teams on both sides, trying to keep the ball in their possession if they can, and looking to their defense to kind of set the tone. It went back and forth. And then Seneca put together one of those monster drives that I tend to associate with Wilmington, a 15-play, 72-yard drive, I think it was, that chewed up like 6 or 7 minutes of game clock and provided a decisive touchdown in that game. So I would be surprised if either one of them deviate at all from what they do in order to try to, I guess, surprise the other one. And I will say this, usually when I'm going through, the results on a Saturday night or Sunday morning after things are all over, I kind of sketch the picks that I think are going to happen in the next round. Just kind of a snap judgment type of thing. There were 2 games out of the 32 games that are left on the calendar for next week where I did not fill in a pick because I cannot make up my mind. Even in a snap judgment type of situation, that's one of the 2 games.
I don't want you to tell me what the other game is yet. I want to see if I can figure it out by the end of this podcast. I'll ask you at the end, okay?
All right. Let's
move on to Class 3A here. Seuss, what stood out for you in this class?
3A, this bracket was largely, kind of went exactly the way that I thought it would. My picks, I missed 2 games, but they were the 2 games that I was most consternated about when making the picks. They were down in the South bracket with Olympia's win and Roxana's win. I got tripped up a little bit on something in Olympia's track record there, which is why I didn't see that game coming. And Roxana St. Joe Ogden, I thought was a straight up coin flip. I don't really think I can take too much ribbing for losing that game, considering the way that it finished. It came down to the 2-point conversion at the end of the game. So, Roxana moving on. I wasn't totally convinced that Roxana had played a quality enough opponent to kind of pencil them into the quarterfinals. This kind of convinced me now, and it's very interesting moving on with them to see how long they can keep this ride going.
On that top half of the bracket, Jesse says, I think Princeton has a good chance at winning, talking about a quarterfinal matchup against Montini. Montini pulled away, but didn't impress me against Prairie Central. What do you think, Seuss?
They did. Montini, he's right. Montini did have a little bit of trouble against Prairie Central. Montini has been doing this a lot this year. They've had a lot of closer games than you might expect, but there has to be said something for their ability to win close games, especially against some of the opponents that they've played this season. I think Princeton has a chance of winning this football game. I still lean towards Montini. I really like what Princeton does defensively, and I don't think Montini's going to be able to score a bunch of points against them. But I'm not sure Princeton's going to be able to score a bunch of points against Montini either. So it's a very close game on paper, but I see the point that you're trying to make here. There's definitely a situation where I can see Princeton winning this game.
I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, Seuss. Yeah. Another game that I think could end up being low-scoring, I want to move over to 4A here, is Sandwich against Wheaton Academy coming into the Class 4A quarterfinals here. Wheaton Academy with a 12-3 win using its defense to shut down St. Viator. Sandwich, we've talked about it a lot, right? The team that didn't even play varsity football last year now finds itself in a state quarterfinal against Wheaton Academy, Souce.
Yeah, it's a game that if you would have told me before the season started, this will be a quarterfinal game in 4A, I would have laughed at you. I mean, for various reasons, because, I mean, obviously what you said about Sandwich, Wheaton Academy had to replace a lot of really key players in their program, most notably a quarterback that started for 4 seasons, and heading into the year, Coach Jim Johannick actually, kind of admitted to me in a preseason email, we're not sure what we're going to do there. Like, and this was in the middle of the summer. They were still trying to sort through several candidates because, I mean, it had been such a stable position for them. So I would have thought that Wheaton Academy would have had to work through some things early in the year, but they gained momentum early, only lost 1 regular season game, and now find themselves in the quarterfinals for the first time in school history, which is a scenario that, like I said, I would not have mapped out for this team. Got a lot of respect for what these guys do and have done, but definitely a really, really nice job of putting the pieces together in that program this year.
Yeah, W Flag 2016 asks, any thoughts on Wheaton Academy's path in 4A? I'll start it off here, Susan, and give my thoughts. I think Wheaton Academy, listen, I don't want to underestimate Sandwich. I've done that all season long, and they continue to be very effective. But I take Wheaton Academy as a favorite to win this game. After that, though, IC Catholic remains, in my book, a pretty substantial favorite to become out of this North bracket, Suze.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that analysis. I think the IC Catholic St. Lawrence game this week will be interesting. I do favor IC Catholic in that scenario. I also favor Wheaton Academy on the top. I think that's probably what we're going to get in the semifinal matchup. But in that scenario, I think IC Catholic's got a few too many horses in that one.
The bottom half of the bracket went kind of what I expected, Suze. Can you tell me a little bit about Harrisburg, though, as an 11 seed taking down Peoria and Notre Dame? This is a team that, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Harrisburg.
They're fast, they're athletic, they're capable of breaking a few big plays. I never did see quite a breakdown on that game, but from what I was told about them early in the year, they're the kind of team that you feel like you have reined in, and then all of a sudden they've busted off a 65, 70-yard touchdown run on you or passing play. They can score quickly. They have some top-notch athletes at the skill positions, but their gameplay can sometimes be erratic. They can look like a really, really good team one moment, and then how did they get here the next? So inconsistency has kind of marked their season so far this year.
We are handing out the final Friday Night Drive Team of the Week MVP belt this week, and I'm seeing Steve Millar. We're trying to behind the scenes here. Our staff is trying to track down. We set out these belts around our region to try and make sure we get them to the right place at the right time. A little inside baseball. Looks like that belt, according to our vote total, probably going to the Joliet market here. Suits, do you have any belts left?
I don't. I personally haven't had a belt this year.
I don't know where the last one is.
I have not possessed one. So in the years past, I was driving around with one in the back of my car for several months, but I do not currently have one. So I don't know where the Phantom belt is, to be honest with you.
I have one, as maybe you guys can see behind me here, from our very first season of handing out these belts. This was a promotional belt that we had that I put in the background here. Gonna have to track that down this afternoon, but let's go ahead, Suze, and get to 5A here, where we have, let's see. There's several interesting games here. I'll start with the top side of the bracket. Morgan Park, Sycamore. This was a game, another game that came down to the closing second. Sycamore looked like Eddie Carifio out there covering that game for us on Saturday. Sycamore was about to go into the end zone, fumbled at the goal line, and Morgan Park recovered that to end up winning this game 27-21, Suze. Any thoughts on that one?
A lot of the criticism of a lot of Chicago Public League teams, especially in the playoffs when they get here, is they might be, very talented, but they tend to come apart when adversity hits. I do not think that that's a component of this particular Morgan Park team, because it felt like Sycamore kind of had control of this game all the way along. And then all of a sudden, Morgan Park kind of jumped back into the game in the second half, took the lead, and then were able to make a play when, it looked like things were going south for them. So obviously a huge win for Morgan Park, getting them into the next round. Once again, the only Chicago Public League team remaining in the field, and beating a Sycamore team that has shown time and time again that they know how to get it done at this time of year. This is a very good win for Morgan Park.
Sets up a matchup against St. Francis. We have a question in here from Jim, who says, who do you like as your Final Four in 5A? We'll, of course, be breaking down the quarterfinal matchups later in the week. But let's go ahead, Souce. Let's go into this 5A right now. I think we talked about Joliet Catholic, Morris. We're looking at Providence, Highland on the bottom side there. You got Naz, Carmel, and St. Francis, Morgan Park. Right offhand, I'm going to throw my 4 teams out there, and Souce, I'll let you tell me if you agree or disagree. I'm going to go St. Francis over Morgan Park. I'm going to take Naz over Carmel. I don't feel good about that one offhand. I'm going to do it, though. I'll take Morris over Joliet Catholic, and I'm going to take Providence over Highland. Any of those you disagree with?
I disagree with 2 of them, and I'm going to start by saying that my caveat here is that this is Monday.
Yep.
And that my answer may change on specifically one of these differences as the week develops and I get more information. Yeah. I agree with Wheaton St. Francis, and my gut is telling me to take Carmel right now. That is, but that, like you, I don't feel comfortable with that pick, even though I'm going the opposite way that you are. I really feel like that's game? No, it is not. Actually, I did pick Carmel last night when I went through it. And then on the bottom side, I'm taking Joliet Catholic. And my reason for taking Joliet Catholic is in the Morris Sacred Heart Griffin game, 2 of the 3 components that I love in the Morris offense sustained what I believe to be pretty serious injuries.
Yeah,
and I don't know their status right now. So if that changes and those guys are both available and with a clean bill of health, or at least a fairly clean bill of health, I might change my mind on that. Like I said, that's a Monday pick for me right now. I'm taking Joliet Catholic on the information that I have. And that, by the way, is the other game where I have not officially made a pick.
Okay.
So, and then I'm going to go Providence on the bottom. They are an inconsistent as inconsistent can be, but man, they seem to know how to get it done in the playoffs.
Yeah, they absolutely do. All right. Make sure you tune back in on Thursday, Jim. See if we can give you some different answers there. You're right, Souce. I should have thought about that before opening my mouth about the Morris injuries. Definitely something to keep in mind this week as it develops. Let's go on to Class 6A, though. Let's see. There was a question about 6A. W Flag 2016. I'll use this kind of framework we're at here. He says, or W Flag 2016 says, Cary Grove East St. Louis state title game again in 6A. Souce, you see anything through the second round that would dissuade you of that feeling?
I don't know if dissuade me. Obviously, I think East St. Louis is more likely to be the entrant of the 2 there.
Yeah.
I think Geneva presents an interesting obstacle this week for Cary Grove. Not that I still favor Cary Grove, and I still think Lake Zurich's going to be hard to knock out of this bracket. So, East St. Louis is doing East St. Louis things. I learned the other day that they were up 54-0.
In a blink of an eye. Yeah.
No, in a blink of an eye, and took a knee on the 1 yard line just before halftime. So they could have gone in, but they didn't just because they kneeled it out to end the first half, and then played freshmen and sophomores for the entire second half.
Man, so that's tough for Normal West.
And it's not exactly like Normal West is a bad football team.
No,
like that's the thing. It's like they're pretty solid, and East St. Louis just took them apart. So that's. And I'll say another thing about that South bracket while we're here. I was really surprised with the difficulties that Kankakee had winning that game against Blue Island Eisenhower this week.
Yeah,
really surprised.
Yeah, the Caves pulled away there in the second half, but they were really struggling in that matchup. And so W flag 2016. I agree with Seuss. I think it would be very surprising if it wasn't East St. Louis on the top side of that bracket there. I still lean Cary Grove, but as Sue said, like I think nothing against Belvedere North, but I think it would either be Geneva or Lake Zurich that would have the best chance to knock off Cary Grove from that bracket. But I'll be honest with you, I'm hoping for a Cary Grove East St. Louis state title game, partially just because I want to see what Cary Grove tries to cook up again. Obviously, Cary Grove surprised East St. Louis in that state title game, one of the best high school football games I think any of us has ever witnessed a couple of years ago. It would be a tall task to do it again, but I didn't think they could do it a couple of years ago, and Brad Seaberg and that staff figured it out. So that's the matchup I'm looking forward to. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, though. All right, Seuss. Let's move on to 7A. I'll let you lead us off here. What stood out to you in 7A?
The one thing that really jumped off the page to me, and we got word of this while we were doing Friday Night Drive live on location, Downers Grove North's win over Hershey, especially considering how the game started, where Hershey felt like they kind of had it in control. They had a 14-3 lead at halftime. Unable to finish that off, and Downers Grove North advancing on. I haven't seen Downers Grove North live, and I've been trying to figure out a way to get that done. I'm hoping to get that done this week because I'm very intrigued by this team. Now that they've got Noah Battle back from injury, they seem to be firing on all cylinders. They're a very interesting team from that perspective. But, on the bottom half of this bracket, really love the way Batavia is playing right now. And obviously Mount Carmel is doing Mount Carmel things. The one outcome that kind of surprised me down there, even though they were the higher seed and still haven't lost on the year, Quincy's ability to just kind of pull away from Wheaton North. They were losing that game early, down 14-12 at halftime, and kind of took it over in the second half. So a really nice win for Quincy in this game.
I thought it was a mistake when I read it because I saw that 14-12 score at halftime, and then I was like, wait, Wheaton North still has 14 points? What happened?
So a nice win for them. So this is an intriguing bracket because obviously you've got the behemoths with Mount Carmel and Batavia on the top, on the bottom there, but you've got a whole bunch of teams that someone's going to come out of that North bracket and be in a state final in 7A that, to my knowledge, and I could be corrected on this, when Lincoln Way West made a final, it was in 5A when we were in 6 classes, but I don't know if any of them have ever been in a final before. So someone's going to make it from that group. So, that we're going to have a new finalist out of the top half of that bracket, and that makes for an interesting situation for me.
I can say at least, I've been doing this for a little more than a decade now. I can think back, I've never seen any of those teams in a state title game. So I love seeing new programs with a chance to win state championships. So looking forward to see how 7A, top half of that bracket plays out. All right, 8A, Seuss, let's wrap it up here. You had York with a close win over Lions. The first thing that jumps out to me, though, is Edwardsville, 48-14 over Glenbard West. This was a Glenbard West team that struggled early in the season, seemed to be putting it together later in the year. Edwardsville, first round, they ended up pulling away, but it took a little bit. So I thought maybe Glenbard West would go down there and give Edwardsville a game. Not the case. The Tigers really ran away with this one, Seuss.
I'd like to say that I saw this coming, but I didn't. I really kind of thought that Glenbard West was playing good enough defense where they were going to make this a better game than it turned out to be. Edwardsville just, I was kind of following that on Twitter, and it felt like Edwardsville was scoring every 30 seconds. It was, they put together a really nice situation. It should have set off alarm bells with me with Edwardsville. They only have one loss on the season. It came to East St. Louis. They somehow held East St. Louis to 27 points in that game. And that probably should have set up the flag that, hey, these guys are legitimate, because very few teams, if any, can do that. Can keep East St. Louis in check and make it a competitive game. I know Mount Carmel beat them early in the year, but Edwardsville was hanging around in that game. They were very competitive in that game. Then they went over to St. Louis and beat Desmet, who is one of the best teams in Missouri. It's a really good football team, and I'll be perfectly honest, I underestimated them.
Yeah, they're playing really good football right now. Now, we were over as we were talking at Barrington on Saturday night for Live with Friday Night Drive on location. Naperville Central took a 14-0 lead in that game. And there was a lot of playoff football on Saturday. You and I were on the sidelines, and I actually said, all right, I'm taking off. Like, I wanted to get back. We had a lot of content coming on the Friday Night Drive. I'll be completely honest with you. With the way that game started, I didn't think Barrington had much of a chance to come back in that game. I thought Naperville Central looked like they came ready to play, was moving the ball effectively. I should have stuck around, apparently, Souce.
Well, I stayed a little bit longer than you did, and Jake Bartleson and I were hanging around for a little while, and I looked at Jake and I said, I want to see if Barrington has a response here after they dropped down. They fell behind 21-7, and they did. They came back in the game, and I was like, okay. And then I too was a little wiped out from the day, and I had a pretty lengthy drive to get back home. So I was like, I'm not going to stay through halftime, but I have a feeling that I'm going to regret that decision. And I was actually considering turning around shortly thereafter when I found out that it was once again a nip and tuck battle, but carried on to home. But Naperville Central came out and did a lot of nice things, but Barrington, to their credit, maintained contact when everything was going right for Naperville Central. And I think that was ultimately what the difference in the game was, because even though it felt like Naperville Central might be on the verge of running away with the game, Barrington didn't panic. They put together an impressive drive shortly after they fell behind, got into a good situation for themselves. And that's kind of the hallmark of this team. I'm fascinated to see what happens in the quarterfinals in their next round. I felt like this game, several times this year, I had to correct myself and go, those guys played each other during the regular season, didn't they? And then I'd be like, no, they didn't. And I don't know if I got thinking that. I just felt like this game was inevitable. So, I'm not really – I can't really explain why I had that little nugget in my brain that led me to believe that they had played. They hadn't. They've got several common opponents, but they have not played.
Yeah, I had that same thing too. I don't know if it was Maine South and Palatine. Did they play?
Yes, they did.
Maybe that's why I'm thinking of it that way. But yeah, I want to give a shout out or a name to watch here. Devin Van Ness, Barrington defensive end, was all over the field once again. Last name might sound familiar to you. That's Lucas Van Ness's younger brother. Lucas Van Ness was a standout at Barrington, went on to Iowa, and was just taken in the first round of the NFL draft by the Green Bay Packers this past spring. You would have fooled me watching Devin play out there. I thought it was Lucas Souce.
Well, when I saw them earlier in the year, I intentionally sometimes try to not look when I'm just kind of watching a game. I try not to find out what the key players are. I try to let my eyes find them. It took no time at all for me to find him in the previous matchup that I went to see Barrington. I discovered him within a minute of watching the defense play. I'm like, oh yeah, that's who it is. And then I check my program for verification, and yeah, that's who it is. So that's a fun little game that I like to play when I go to games that I have not seen the team before. But truly a capable player and a guy to watch as we head into the next round.
He is Steve Soucie. You can find him on Twitter at The Souce. You can find myself on Twitter at Kyle Nabors. You can find Friday Night Drive on Twitter at FN Drive, and on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as well. We'll have full coverage of the state quarterfinals coming up for you at FridayNightDrive.com throughout the week. Souce and I will be back later in the week to preview that quarterfinal round, Souce. But before we sign off, give us some final thoughts on this round.
Well, the interesting thing that I look at as we move past this round is there were so many games that had intriguing finishes and just kind of broke down that way. And it was what I expected from this round. But now my head is kind of spinning because, interestingly enough, I haven't figured out where I'm going this week, and I can't make a decision. That's what it really comes down to. And kind of soft scheduled, what we needed to do. And then I looked and I was like, wait a minute, I haven't given myself a game to go to yet. And I tried to pick and I couldn't. So I still haven't decided, and I'm going to give myself another day or two before I decide. I might try something crazy like trying to go to multiple games.
So you try and hit 3 games up or something crazy?
Yeah, try to find a little area where I can, navigate the traffic to see multiple games over the course of the afternoon. So it's going to be fascinating either way, because we still, through 2 rounds, in my opinion, we have not had what I would classify big upsets. We've had a few what I would classify as minor upsets, but we have not had. So what that means is we're heading on a collision course to really, really good football teams meeting each other all over the brackets and all of the classifications. And I think that starts this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun weekend of quarterfinal football. Come back with us on Thursday. You'll find out where Soucie and I are heading this weekend. We'll preview all those quarterfinal matchups. And one more time, stick to FridayNightDrive.com for all of our coverage throughout the week. Thank you, everyone who joined us live. For Steve Soucie, I am Kyle Nabors. We'll talk to you guys later this week.
Come to Candlelight Inn, home of the original Chicken George and Jan Sauce. Dine in, carry out, and catering available. Located in Rock Falls and Sterling, Illinois, as well as Clinton, Iowa. Come try our original Chicken George today.
Need a roof, vinyl windows, or doors? Call R.E. Duchesne Construction. With an A-plus rating for the Better Business Bureau and servicing Will, Grundy, and Kendall counties, call R.E. Duchesne. 815-722-2821. Financing available. Find out more online at reduchene.com.
Are going to come right down to the wire.
Yeah, he really likes this field.
Team of the Week MVP.
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich.
We like Reich.
We're here to help you with your problems that result from an automobile accident or an injury on the job or the loss of a loved one. There's no reason you should go through this alone and guess that you're doing things right.
We deal with tragedies that affect families and individuals every day.
Come here and protect your interest. We've been doing this collectively for over 100 years. Let's put that experience to work for you.